I am Charlene Schwank, a teacher at Fraser Elementary School. I'm a member of the teacher squad because I want to be there for you, and I'm here for you today to read you my favorite story named Wilma Unlimited. This is a true story about a fellow Tennessean. Governor Bill Lee is a Tennessean. I am a Tennessean, and so are you. Let's see what made Wilma unlimited. No one expected such a tiny girl to have a first birthday. In Clarksville, Tennessee in 1940, life for a baby who weighed about 4 pounds was sure to be a limited life. But most babies didn't have 19 older brothers and sisters, and most babies didn't have a mother who knew home remedies, and most babies didn't have a father who worked several jobs, and most babies were not Wilma Rudolph. Wilma did celebrate her first birthday, and everyone noticed that as soon as the girl could walk, then she preferred to run or jump. But she worried many people because she was always so small and sickly. If a brother or sister had a cold, she got double pneumonia. If a brother or sister got the measles, Wilma got the measles and the mumps and the chicken pox. Her mother always nursed her at home because doctors were a luxury for the Rudolph family. And anyway, in the entire town of Clarksville, Tennessee, there was only one doctor that would treat black people. Just before Wilma turned 5, she got sicker than ever. Her brothers and sisters heaped all the family's blankets on her, trying to keep her warm. During that sickness, Wilma's left leg twisted inward, and she couldn't move it back. Not even Wilma's mother knew what was wrong. The doctor came in to see her, and besides scarlet fever, he said Wilma had also been stricken with polio. In those days, most children who got polio either died or were permanently crippled. There was no cure. The news spread around Clarksville that Wilma, that lively girl that preferred to run instead of walk, would never walk again. But Wilma did not let that limit her. She kept moving any way she could. She'd hop on one foot to get around the house, or to go to the outhouse in the backyard, or even on Sundays to go to church. And Wilma's mother urged her on because Mrs. Rudolph had plenty to do, cooking and cleaning and sewing patterned flour sacks into clothes for her children. And now there were 22 in all. Yet twice every week, she and Wilma took the bus to the nearest hospital that would treat black patients, some 50 miles away in Nashville. They rode together in the back, the only place blacks were allowed to sit. Doctors and nurses at that hospital helped Wilma do exercises to make her paralyzed leg stronger. At home, Wilma practiced the exercises constantly, even when it hurt. To Wilma, what hurt the most was not her leg that was twisted, and it was not the exercises. What hurt her most was that the school wouldn't let her attend because she couldn't walk. Tearful and lonely, every day she watched her brothers and sisters run off to school, leaving her behind. Finally, Wilma got tired of crying all the time, and she decided to fight back somehow. She didn't want her life to be limited. Wilma worked so hard at her exercises that the doctors decided she was ready for a heavy steel brace. With the brace supporting her leg, she didn't have to hop anymore. School was possible at last. But school wasn't the happy place Wilma had imagined. Her classmates made fun of her brace, and during playground games, she could only sit on the sidelines, twitchy with impatience. She studied the other kids for hours, memorizing their moves, watching the ball zoom through a bushel basket they used as a hoop. Wilma fought her sadness by doing exercises. Her family always cheered her on, and Wilma did everything she could to keep them from worrying about her. At times, her leg really did seem to be getting stronger, and other times, it just hurt. One Sunday on her way to church, Wilma felt especially good. She and her family had always found strength in their faith, and church was Wilma's favorite place in the world. Everybody she knew would be there, talking and laughing and praying and singing. It would be just the place for her to try to do the bravest thing she had ever done. She hung back while the people filled the old church building. Standing alone, Wilma heard the sound of hymns coloring the air, and she unbuckled her heavy brace and set it by the church's front door. Taking a deep breath, she moved one foot in front of the other, her knees trembling violently. She took her mind off her knee and began concentrating on taking another breath, and then another, and then another. And Wilma began her first steps toward becoming unlimited. As the sounds of hymns colored the air in her church, Wilma did the bravest thing she had ever done. She walked down the aisle of the church with empty legs, empty of the heavy steel brace. Whispers rippled throughout this gathering at the church. Wilma Rudolph was walking. Wilma Rudolph is walking. Row by row, heads turned as she walked down the aisle. Her large family, all her family's friends, everyone from school, each person stared wide-eyed. The singing never stopped. It seemed to burst right through the walls and out into the trees. Finally, Wilma reached a seat in the front and sat down. And she, too, began to sing and colored the air with triumphant songs as she wore a triumphant smile. Wilma practiced walking as often as she could after that, and when she was 12 years old, she was able to take off the brace for good. She and her mother realized she could get along without it. And so one memorable day, they wrapped that hated brace, that heavy brace, in a box and mailed it back to the hospital. As soon as Wilma sent that box away, she knew her life was no longer limited, and it was just beginning. After years of sitting on the sidelines, Wilma couldn't wait to throw herself into the game of basketball, the game she liked most to watch. She was skinny but no longer tiny. Her long legs would propel her across the court and through the air. She knew all the rules. She knew all the moves. In high school, she led her basketball team to one victory after another. Eventually, she took the team all the way to the Tennessee State Championship. And there, to everyone's astonishment, her team lost. Wilma had become accustomed to winning, and now she slumped on the bench, the liveliness knocked out of her. But at the game that day was a college coach. He admired Wilma's basketball playing, but was especially impressed by the way she ran. He wanted her for his track and field team. With his help, Wilma won a full athletic scholarship to Tennessee State University, and she was the first member of her family to go to college. 8 years after she had mailed away that hated heavy steel brace, Wilma's long legs and years of hard work carried her thousands of miles from Clarksville, Tennessee. In the summer of 1960, she arrived in Rome, Italy, to represent the United States at the Olympic Games as a runner. Just participating in the Olympics was a deeply personal victory for Wilma, but her chances of winning a race were limited. Simply walking in Rome's shimmering heat was a chore, and athletes from other countries had run faster races than Wilma had ever run. Women weren't thought to run very well anyway. Track and field was considered a sport for men, and the pressure from the public was intense. For the first time ever, the Olympics would be shown on television, and all the athletes knew that more than 100 million people would be watching. And then worst of all, Wilma had twisted her ankle just after she arrived in Rome. It was swollen and painful on the day of her first race. Can she be limited or can she be unlimited? Once it was her turn to compete, Wilma forgot about her ankle and everything else. She lunged forward, not thinking about her fear, not thinking about her pain, not realizing that sweat was flying off her face. She ran better than she had ever run before, and she ran better than anyone else. Grabbing the attention of the whole world, more than 100 million people, Wilma Rudolph of the United States won the 100-meter dash. No one else even came close. An Olympic gold medal was hers to take home. Then it was time for the 200-meter dash. Wilma's graceful long legs were already famous, and her ears buzzed with the sound of the crowd chanting her name. Such support helped her ignore the rain that was beginning to fall. At the crack of the starting gun, she surged into the human air like a tornado. When she crossed the finish line, she had done it again. She finished far ahead of everyone else. She had earned her second gold medal. Wet and breathless, Wilma was exhilarated by the double triumph. Wilma's team faced the toughest competition yet. The 400-meter relay race was yet to come. Wilma was the fourth and final runner on the team, and it was Wilma who had to cross the finish line. When you run a relay race, there are 4 members on your team, and you pass a baton when it becomes your time to run. And that's what this picture is showing you. 2 gold medals. Wilma's teammates ran very well, and they passed the baton very smoothly, and they kept the team in first place. Wilma readied herself for the dash to the finish line as her third teammate ran toward her. She reached back for the baton and nearly dropped it. As she tried to recover from that fumble, two other runners sped ahead of her. Wilma and her team were in third place. Ever since the day Wilma walked down the aisle at the church and heard the colors of the hymns in the air, Wilma had known the power of concentration. And now, with her legs pumping, she put her mind to work. In a final electrifying burst of speed, she pulled ahead. By a fraction of a second, she was the first to blast across the finish line. The thundering cheers matched the thundering of her own heart. She made history. She had won an Olympic gold medal for an astounding third time. At her third ceremony that week, the band played the Star-Spangled Banner. Wilma stood tall and still like a queen, the last of her 3 Olympic gold medals hanging around her neck. Wilma Rudolph, once known as the sickliest child in Clarksville, had become the fastest runner in the world. Wilma Unlimited. This book was written by Kathleen Crow and illustrated by David Diaz. And if you want to see the real Wilma, you can go Google Wilma Rudolph and you can see her Olympic performance as she won the 100 meter, the 200 meter, and the 400 meter relay race. Wilma was destined for a limited life, but she overcame every limit and she became unlimited to become the fastest woman in the world. Numbers are unlimited. Wilma was unlimited. Wilma had been stricken with polio, which is a child disease that was contagious. But children could take a vaccine, and you probably took a vaccine for polio when you were a small child. In these days where we are living, when we cannot go to school because we're afraid of getting sick from the coronavirus, please remember Wilma. Polio could have limited her. The coronavirus can limit people. But remember the character of perseverance and strength and self-discipline that Wilma had. She became not Wilma the limited, but Wilma the unlimited. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed my favorite story.